Welcome to this feature highlight video on the topic of the new config search and ad hoc query features introduced in Gluware 4.0. Both of these features are available in the Device Explorer, which is available in the Device Manager, Config Drift and Audit, and OS Manager application. Both of these features help solve the problem of finding the needle in the haystack, typically when troubleshooting a network problem, although there are many other applicable use cases. The first feature is config search, which does what it sounds like. It enables the user the ability to search all of the selected or filtered devices across all their configuration files. The second feature is Ad Hoc Query, which has a dual-purpose query function. First is to query across the config files for specific information and allow you to drill down into that information. The second, probably even more powerful, is the ability to run one or more show commands on each device and then apply a regex-based query to the output of those commands with summary and enabling you to drill down into those detailed results. So let's take a look at a few examples in the Gluware user interface. Okay, here we are inside the Gluware 4.0 user interface, and I'm looking at the default dashboard here called Welcome to Gluware. So I'm going to navigate into one of the applications that has the Device Explorer to show you these features. So let's go into Device Manager, which is typically the starting point when you're beginning to work with your devices inside of Gluware. So here in Device Manager, I have 5 devices that have already been discovered, as well as snapshots have been taken. So as a quick reminder, when Gluware discovers a device, we perform a detailed inquiry on that device to capture its details. We also save the latest running configuration, which is called the latest snapshot. And to see that, you can double click on any one of these devices, then its information appears in the top part of the grid. You then click on the configuration view, and you can see the last capture that occurred and the timestamp on that capture. So here you can see the whole configuration file. So new feature number 1 we're going to look at here is config search. Config search is now built into the search bar of your Device Explorer grid. So to execute a config search, instead of scanning manually through all the lines of the configuration, if you drop this search bar down and go into the search parameters, you're going to see a couple new options. One is latest snapshot, which is what I just described, and the second is the default snapshot. Because if you want Gluware to do periodic captures of and discovery of the configuration, as well as to specify a default, you do that in the Config Drift and Audit application, which we're not going to cover here in this demonstration. So for this demonstration, we're going to be primarily working with the latest snapshot, which you see here. So select latest snapshot, and then you're going to see some different parameters. I find the two most useful you're going to find for searching configuration is either begins with, when you're using a config statement, from the beginning here, or a contains. So if I go back to latest snapshot and either begins with or contains, I'm going to start with begins, and let's take an example here where I want to see if any of my devices are configured for BGP. So I'm going to search for the string router BGP and hit apply. And I can see that 4 of my 5 routers, 1 disappeared, are configured for BGP. Let's execute another search. Instead of router BGP, let's take a look at Ntp server and hit apply. And I can see all 5 of my devices are configured with Ntp server. So another example is I can say contains, and I can put in an IP address like 10.255.150.1. I happen to know that's the gateway of last resort, or the default route, and I can hit apply. And once again, all the devices have that. Anything that's left after you apply your filter, those devices have those configuration. So that's how you execute config search, is that search identifies the devices that meet that criteria. So let's take it one step further and go into our next feature, which is Ad Hoc Query. So for Ad Hoc Query, a very important first task is you have to click on one or more devices in the grid. So if I use the shortcut Control A, Control All, I select all my devices. Again, you must select one or more devices, and then navigate into the icon here for Ad-Hoc Query. When you navigate into Ad-Hoc Query, you're going to see the query interface pop up on the top part of the grid here. And you have a few choices. You can do a new query, and any of the queries you saved are going to be available in this list. So let's start with the first part of query I described, which is searching for something in the configuration. So I'm gonna pull up a search called Ntp server config. So I'm going to search my latest snapshot. I'm going to search the full configuration, and I'm going to search for Ntp server. I just want to know, is Ntp server configured and how it's configured. And I have all these devices here, and I'm going to execute run query. When you execute a search or query across your snapshots, it's going to execute very quickly because all those config files are already stored in the underlying database. So I can see on each one of these devices in this sample network here, I have 4 matches. If you want to see those, you navigate into the action view, and then if you've used Drift and Audit, similar interface where you can use the arrow keys, and it's going to show you where the matches exist. So I can see that my Ntp is configured here, and there's 4 instances on this device, and I can navigate to another device, and I can see the same thing. So I'll jump back. That is how you execute a search of the config file. And again, this is regex capable. So let's take a more interesting view now. I know Ntp is configured. I want to know what the Ntp status is. So if we want to look at operational status, I'm going to pull up a config I saved, which is searching the device as a source. And I'm going to execute show commands, and I'm going to use show Ntp status. So now I'm not just looking at config information. I want to know the status, and my query is clock is. Now I could take it one step further and be clock is synchronized or clock is unsynchronized, but I actually for this demo purpose, I want to see both. So I'm going to just hit run query, and I can see it's going to take a little longer when you execute a device query because the engine is executing an SSH session into those devices. It's executing those commands, pull results back, and then executing the query on the results. So if I look at my CSR 155 down here and I navigate into actions, I can see the output of the command, which I'm running a show Ntp status, and I can see in green I matched the query. So clock is. So that's good. Now let's take a look at some of these other devices, and I can see clock is, and I can see all these are saying clock is synchronized. Let's take a look at CSR number 1, which it did not have results for this. Now I can see that while Ntp is configured, the show Ntp status is not returning a result. So this is the one, let's say if I was troubleshooting, this would be the needle in the haystack. So let's jump back and take a look at 2 more quick examples so you understand the feature a little bit better. Let's take a look at multiple shows searching for an IP. So again, I mentioned you can execute show commands. By the way, not just show, there's numerous other commands you can run, but these are deemed to be read-only commands for semantics on other device platforms that use like a display or other term. We are filtering because we don't want user to be able to execute like a reload or a write erase or anything destructive. So you will get an error if you try to run commands that are not supported. But here's running multiple show commands, and it's going to be a device query by show command. And I'm going to run 2 show commands. I want to look at the configuration using a show run, the show running config, and I want to look at the routing table using a show IP route. Now I'm going to use a little bit more sophisticated query using regex to search for a very specific IP, which is at 10.255.150.1. And so I'm going to go ahead and execute this query. And again, it will take a few minutes to run because in this case it is in parallel. It's accessing all these devices, executing the show commands, and capturing the results. And again, I can see I have results here, and I know By the way, my network is configured. The CSR, this guy is a different config profile than these other ones. These other 4 are pretty uniform. But as I navigate into the results, I can see Gluware found the IP default route, which is good, and that's expected. If I navigate again, I can see that default gateway is also acting as an NTP server, which is great. And then I navigate again, and now I'm looking into the output of a show command, which is the show IP route, and I can see that IP is in my routing table. So that's great as well. So let's navigate up into the CSR and figure out why it's different. So I have the default route is the only output that I have. Oh, and it's tied to a VRF. So again, that particular router is different, and the static route is tied to a virtual routing and forwarding instance. And again, just an example of a useful type of query. And navigate back, and so that's kind of the summary of the ad hoc query. Is you're executing searches to search into the configuration or search into a running operational state. One very last quick thing to touch on is that if you want to use the Gluware concept items, I'm going to look at NTP concept item. So we're going to do a device search. We're going to use a concept item. A concept item, not to go into too much depth, it just means Gluware understands the feature, and we're going to look at the configuration, but we're only looking at a specific part of the configuration. So Gluware is looking to isolate the configuration for NTP, and I'm going to query again for NTP. So just to compare and contrast how these different operations run, we're going to run this query. So again, I'm doing a device query, so we're executing a command. We're looking at a show run, but looking at a specific section of the config, in this case for NTP, and then looking at the output. So the key difference to it is you're not searching the whole configuration, you're isolating to a specific part of the config you want to look at. And if I navigate in, you're going to see only a few lines here, because this is the section of the configuration I was using, isolating it by the Gluware concept item, which means we know how to look at this feature. So that is the summary or pretty quick summary highlight video here on the new config search and the ad hoc query function. Again, as a reminder that the query function can query the configuration information and also the state information using things like show commands. So once again, thank you for your time and interest in Gluware. If you are interested in trying Gluware, there's 3 ways. A new way, what we introduced here with Gluware 4.0 and Gluware Pro, is Gluware Free for up to 100 devices, and that does include Device Manager, of which I was just demonstrating with these new features. For more information, go to gluware.com/pricing, and you can check out the free version of Gluware. Also, if you want to get more in depth and use Gluware for various use cases, you can sign up for the test drive, where we spin up a virtual system, set you up, and help you through guided video tutorials to execute some test cases. I think you'll find it pretty interesting to get hands-on. Third way, a little more traditional, is just go to gluware.com and request a demo. In that case, our sales team will engage with you, understand your requirements, and help to see how we can help bring you network automation much more quickly and more intelligent than you might be doing it or might not be doing it. So we look forward to helping you out. Again, thanks for your time.